everyone, and welcome back to another AI Deep Dive session. I'm Maria Sârbu, Marketing Manager at AscentCore, and today we're looking at how AI has moved from being just a buzzword to actually driving change, also bringing opportunities and challenges for media leaders. Today, I'm joined by two experts who have a lot of knowledge in this space. I'm really excited to present them. So first, we have here Jonathan Rivers, who's a media technology executive, who also drove the generative AI transformation for Fortune. And we have Cornel Ștefănache, our CTO at AscentCore, whose teams build and scale AI solutions across industries, especially for media. So thank you guys for joining me today. And before we're deep diving into the AI discussion, I would like to give our listeners a brief introductions about you. So I'm not the only one who's calling you experts. All right, who wants to go first?
Well, look, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here. I'm Jonathan Rivers. I've probably got about 25 years plus in the media technology space, everything from building a publisher-side ad-serving system back in the old school days to building all of the cloud infrastructure for PBS. I've also been at The Telegraph in London and Fortune magazine, where I just finished up doing a digital transformation on a 95-year-old magazine, turning it into a world-class media company.
Indeed. Thank you, Jonathan. Cornel.
I'm Cornel, CTO at AscentCore. I'm in the industry for more than 20 years. Besides software development, I joined a research lab, AI research lab, back in 2006. So I've been in this game since the beginning. I have seen the evolution of AI during the time. Lately, the adoption exploded. So I'm really thrilled to be part of this movement and see some of the things that we researched in the past moving to production nowadays.
Great. Thank you so much. As I said, I'm really excited. So now let's dive deep into how AI is reshaping the media industry and also to see what next steps the leaders should take into this journey. And the first question that I have is for you, Jonathan. You've said that media companies are sitting on gold mines of structured data. In your view, why is now the moment for AI in media industry beyond the hype?
Yeah, look, I think there are a couple of things, and a lot of them go to business model. And it's one of the things that's really important in the media space. You know, the aggregators have beat them up and taken their lunch money, and all of the media companies have really struggled to find new business models. And so when you work with a company that has been around for a long time, you're sitting on deep archives. And using AI to unlock the power of them can come in a couple of different forms. One, the idea of information services, where, journalism companies have reporting that transcends space and time and going back to those archives and sort of remonetizing them. The second place that AI helps there is actually understanding what's in those archives. If you have 95 years of magazines with all of the articles, understanding what's in all of the content or what you want to look at, simple text search isn't going to do. That's a place that AI really helps out. And then the second is in distribution. All of the media companies that are successful are focusing on distributing their content as widely and vastly as possible and understanding what happens at scale. What content works on what platforms. AI is perfectly poised to help solve that problem.
Great, thank you. And I'm curious, from your experience at Fortune and other brands, what business drivers, like, for example, revenue or operations, made AI not just viable, but actually necessary?
Yeah, a lot of it is revenue driven. Publishing is relatively simple. You create some content, you publish it. It doesn't have the complexity that a supply chain would. But the idea there, again, I go back to the two, figuring out how you monetize all of your old content. How do you use it from a reference point of view so that your own journalists know what you wrote and can either reference it, reuse it, or bring it back out? And the second is those distribution channels. And third, very specifically on revenue, is around optimization, figuring out the proper yield. When you have multiple business lines that you're operating and many customers, figuring out the right offer or the right blend of services for the right customer coming from the right place is something that you can use AI to do in a more sophisticated fashion than just raw A/B testing.
Very, very great. Really good information. And how did you actually prove ROI early on to the company?
Here's the dirty secret: you don't. You don't, and it's important. It's really important to sort of talk about, especially with emerging technology. If you start at ROI on your first experiment, you've already lost. The return on investment is learning. The return on investment is finding all of the unknown unknowns that are going to plague you in the marketplace, all of the things you didn't understand about your data, all the things you didn't understand about your business, all the things you didn't understand about the technology itself. So I always say that ROI needs to come for the second round. The first round, you need to get out there and do something. You can't get caught napping. You know, there's a great quote running around that I would rather get a speeding ticket on AI than a parking ticket, right? And if you start with the bean counting and say, we're not going to do this experiment unless I can prove its value, then you're going to end up doing nothing, waiting for all of the experimental tech to pass, for it to become mainstream, and then you're going to be a laggard.
Yeah, that's really, really important. Like, you're going to miss the wave if you're not starting early on, even if you don't have the ROI ready.
It is, and it's huge. You know, my CEO, sort of Alan Murray, had said this to me, where, you know, he was pushing for AI and us to figure it out, and he was like, look, you just spent 5 years doing a digital transformation, getting us into the modern web era. We cannot afford to wait 5 years and have to do that transformation again with AI.
Yeah. It's so true. Really great insights. I'm loving this. Cornel, when you work with media executives today, where do you see the biggest disconnect between AI's potential and actual adoption?
Well, there are actually two problems here. One of the problem is if it can be solved with a large language model. The issue is aligning the development and integration of AI with the current company roadmap. Usually takes some time and a special setup. In the same space, the problem is with the adoption of the language models. If you go into a more private, into privacy concerns, deploying a local model is money hungry and power hungry. So scaling that, it becomes a usability problem more than a processing problem. The other issue that we have identified in AI adoption is, if it's not a large language model problem, is convincing the executives that it is not a large language model problem. So we need to convince them that other algorithms out there, probably older algorithms, are more suitable for solving their problem rather than the language model. So it's first we need to understand the problem, and then we need to prepare a business case for the solution and come back to the executives with that solution.
All right. And how does this assessment, if we're looking at a journey map for this assessment, what predictive model opportunity you would say it moves the needle faster?
So I think that the fastest adoption is of a language model that solve internal processes problems. So usually it's easier to measure the improvement when we optimize internal processes, when we enable searching through a large amount of information with some context and with additional information, because this is where language model excel at. With language model, the adoption is instant, because you take the model and you just give it some piece of information, context, or perform a preliminary search, and you just get the output. With other classical models, you will require some training, some measurement, which increases the time for adoption. So I would say that adoption of language models into optimization of internal processes would be the fastest approach that we have identified in working with our clients.
Right. And going back to Jonathan's point, since there doesn't seem to be so many executives that are bought in from the start, what would be some arguments that you would use in the conversations to make them understand the importance of following this process?
Well, first of all, we need to understand that AI does not replace old features. AI unlocks new opportunities. And the unlocking new opportunities will require some thinking around the business, evaluating the ROI of that implementation, because it is a cost attached to the development. So probably speaking with the executive business rather than technology will increase that hunger for adopting AI.
Got it. Great insights. All right. So getting back to Jonathan here, when you led the Fortune 500 AI initiative, what were the first real use cases that you targeted and why those?
Yeah, the original use case was research. So the idea is that you take 20 years of the Fortune archives and you take 20 years of Fortune 500 performance data. And the thing about the Fortune 500 is it's actually 1,000. So you have 1,000 companies that are ranked, and so you have 26 data points on 1,000 companies over 20 years. And the idea was really to deploy a what we would call a prosumer, right? So not necessarily a super deluxe research tool, but something that a casual researcher would do to understand trends. What's happening in the oil and gas sector? What's happening in software development? What are the trends that we've seen on companies in Europe rising in these three sectors over the couple of years? So really to design a system that allowed a researcher to test hypotheses and to start understanding questions in a very, very quick turnaround time, where pouring through those big spreadsheets of data would take too long to actually research, prune, and test whether or not there was a real question or an answer there.
I see. And looking back, what worked and what did you wish you had done differently when deploying?
Well, look, I'm going to say what not a lot of people on the sales side will say, but as somebody who's built a couple of them and worked with it, the technology isn't ready yet. This is bleeding edge precursor technology, and a lot of it just isn't ready for real production prime time. And here's the biggest learning that I maybe missed as a technologist that is really crucial for a journalist. If it is 1% wrong, it is 100% wrong.
Wow, that's really strong.
And you have to remember that when your business is trusted journalism, not entertainment, trusted journalism, all of your facts have to be 100% correct. And so you're spending a lot of time developing methods and sort of scaffolding to get around the hallucination problem that ends up watering down the product. And so if you accept it as notional or directional, then they're perfectly sufficient, but you still have to fact check a tool that's designed to sort of speed up your process. And I think that was one. The second is, and Cornell sort of mentioned this, I would probably never try and train a custom LLM again. I don't think the ROI is there. I think it's a lot of work, and the lift just doesn't create the yield. I would spend my money on the things that are differentiators that actually create value. Cleaning my data, working on my UX, integrating it into my other product lines, and really rely on the core AI service providers to do the models and use those.
All right. Well, Cornell, would you like to add something to Jonathan's learnings on this area?
Well, I totally agree that the current state of large language models are we should no longer focus on fine-tuning or training from scratch. because that's not their purpose. Their purpose is to synthesize and generate information based on custom information. So if we want them, so we shouldn't rely on the information that the large language model learned. We should rely on the capabilities of generating content based on our data.
All right. Okay, thank you for this insight. And now, keeping on the AscentCore side, I would like to know how companies can move from this exploratory pilots to actually business-ready AI tools, especially if we're talking about legacy platforms.
Well, yes. So this we're going to see. This is an emerging tech. We're going to see a lot of tools, frameworks, platforms being developed constantly for the next 5 years that are going to revolutionize everything. But moving from pilot to production ready is not necessarily a software development issue. Is more of a business value issue, because it is not, the investment is large enough to require some initial evaluation, and because, as I stated, it is money hungry. Having such models running on your local infrastructure in cloud or adopting already existing, it's pretty expensive. But how we are usually doing this, we allow our customers to explore some of their ideas in an isolated, cheap, fast environment. Because throughout our experience, we gathered enough tools and we got inspired by the software development frameworks, and we built a runtime superset of software that allows our customers to experiment with their ideas in days and come up with an outcome in weeks. So we have our pilot program that allows anybody to experiment for free and see if the ROI is really worth it on the long run.
Wow, that's really great information here. Let me move to my second. All right, so let's zoom in on data itself. And Jonathan, I would like to know, at Fortune, since you trained the LLM on decades of proprietary content, what was the actual value that was unlocked for users and for the business? I know you mentioned already for the business, the use case, but I would like to see if you have some more.
Sure, there are a couple of things there. The first is discoverability. Right. And this is one of the places that LLMs are great. The idea that they can summarize information, but it allowed both our customers as well as our internal staff to find content more quickly. So, give me an article about X, Y, or Z, or have we ever run a story on this topic? So the ability to find and comb through these vast archives very, very quickly with a summarization, okay, and now the ability to click into the actual, right, the cited or reference article. So it made the process of getting the information they needed vastly quicker. And at the end of the day, that's actually the job, right? My job as a CTO in the media space is to get my customers the information they need in a manner they can consume it. And these tools really helped us unlock that.
Great. And can you tell us a little bit about what challenges did you face around data quality, governance, or user trust?
Sure. Well, there are a couple. The first, if it's 1% wrong, it's 100% wrong. And that trust with journalists is very, very important. So understanding that you have this initial set of resistance because it might be notionally correct, it might be largely correct, but it's not completely correct, was one. And then I think there were two other challenges that we encountered that were interesting. The first is that language changes over time. And so words and phrases that might have been acceptable 20 years ago are not particularly popular right now. And so you really have to take a look and an eye at the content that you're working with. And does it meet current standards? Does it meet current norms? How do you want to sort of approach that? You have to have a conversation and understand, what you want to approach that with. And the third, and what was really interesting, I think, to me, and it's something that I caution everybody about, is no matter how clean you think your data are, they are dirtier than you think, or there are gotchas that you weren't expecting. And when you think about business journalism or companies, you run into an interesting problem, say, for example, with company names. So is it Hewlett-Packard, or is it HP? Is it JP Morgan? Is it Chase? Is it JP Morgan Chase? Is it IBM? Is it International Business Machine? And so you have companies with multiple names, you have them with abbreviations. The models need to know and respond to all of that. Also, nomenclature. And I think this is one of the killer apps, and the stuff that I'm doing these days is very, very focused on that, is creating a semantic layer or a translation, because you start to think about media names, right? You said, I'm a media executive. Now, if a salesperson in, say, a professional services company or a technology company, they might work in the CMT vertical, so the communications, media, and telecom. But I might think we're a software company, or I might think we're in publishing. And you take that for software. Is it software? Is it SaaS? Is it CRM tools? So when people are using LLMs to ask questions, the LLMs aren't necessarily going to understand the connections between some of the semantic intentions of the question. I need to know the top makers of CRM software that aren't SaaS, right? Maybe that's just a mail merge. That's not really a thing. Doesn't matter. But understanding what they're trying to ask is still really a gotcha, especially with the complexity of business synonyms, acronyms, and terms.
Okay. Well, and that brings me to to Cornell. Like, is there any way that we can help companies in solving this critical?
This is a really good question that we always saw this problem with our customers, asking us, why are your tools better than us adopting directly ChatGPT or Gemini or other large language models? And we were getting back to them and with the same explanation, is consistency. So you might get the expected answer 1 time, 2 times, 10 times, but you will have to repeat the same process 1,000 times, 1 million times. The biggest problem that is in the 10 experiments that you're doing, you might get one answer wrong, but that represents 10%. Imagine finding the 10% out of 1 million which are wrong. So our tools are adopting the best practices in LLM interaction, like chain of thought, easy to implement a chain of thought or a tree of thought, such that you would get consistent responses. More than that, you will get tools that will evaluate and mark the responses that should not be trusted. So you will get the best practices already implemented, already in place, deployed the next day in your infrastructure, ready to use.
Really great to know, if the listeners are hearing us today. All right, we walked through the how, and now for the big picture, getting back to Jonathan. You've built AI tools that worked. So what's your single biggest piece of advice for a C-level executive choosing between build in-house versus partner for AI?
I would say partner. That's at the end of the day, you need to ask if you're a technology company, right? And let me use an example. When I'm evaluating a vendor who says they have AI functionality, one of the rules I give my team is that if their AI budget is not the same or larger than the rest of their product features, it's not real AI. And so you take that and you start to say, how much should I as a company be investing in the actual AI tooling itself, right? It's almost like, should I just go build my own cloud infrastructure? Should I build all of the tools that AWS has in my own data center? The answer is no. You should use products that allow you to do that. They've spent millions or billions of dollars on learning that, and that's like, this is the learning, especially I'd said this to a colleague of mine. The closer your product is to ChatGPT, it's going to be judged by its standards, right? And they're throwing billions of dollars at this technology, right? So all of the big providers, the big four, the big five, are spending billions of dollars on research of this technology. Are you going to compete? Do you want to retain the talent? Do you want to hire all of the data scientists, the machine learning experts, knowing that their salaries are ballooning? The market is very, very hot. You are just better off partnering now until it gets democratized, where you're like the cloud providers have, where you're focusing on the tooling, the differentiators, the parts about your business. As Cornell said, the internal workflows. Figuring out those places you can prove value without just doing esoteric R&D, right? That's just not going to get you anywhere.
Great. Thank you. All right, Cornell, in less than a minute, how should a media CTO structure their first 90 days, to say so, for an AI program to actually avoid those costs that you mentioned initially in our conversation?
First of all, start small, quick pilots. Experiment really fast, bad products that should be thrown away. Evaluate the real ROI, evaluate the quality of the output, and then pick the one that gets you the most value out of it. So I think that for the first 30 days is just rapid prototyping, coming up with all the business cases that you can imagine, evaluate the quality of it, and spend the rest of the 60 days implementing it.
All right. Finally, we reached to the end, and I want to know, it's a question for both of you. Who wants to take it first? You can go ahead. I would like to know in 30 seconds, what's the future of AI in media really about? Again, beyond the hype, beyond the buzz, for our listeners who are, again, media executives, this is something they should know.
Yeah, look, I'll start. I don't believe that it is full content creation, right? I don't fundamentally think the technologies are there. I think it's a new tool. In many regards, it's another way to help speed the generation of content, where you think about the difference between writing a novel with a pen versus a typewriter versus the word processor, for those of us whose beards are gray enough to remember what those were, and sort of now computers. So this is a set of technology that unlocks creativity, that removes barriers to entry, to burdens, to sort of content creation. The second is that it's there. Like, it is not going away, and it is going to affect everything. And so everything from content creation to reducing the barrier to entry, to how business operations are done. But really, and this goes back to a point that I said a little earlier, the future of media is syndication and distribution. You need to get your content out as far and wide to your audience as possible. And once you reach that scale, understanding what happened with it is really where AI is going to come in and assist. It allows you to do or to analyze and sift vastly larger sets of data than you could as a human, and it unlocks new possibilities that you just couldn't know unless you're doing a lot of hypothesizing and fishing in your data lake.
All right. Great insights. Cornell?
Well, I totally agree with Jonathan. So I do see two ways of media using AI. One is the good way. Jonathan expressed it really, really well. And is the bad way. disinformation. So the big problem is that with AI is just a tool. AI is just a tool that enables bad actors to generate bad content. So I think it's going to be used for both. And now it's a huge race of whomever is able to create that AI that will filter out the bad content.
Really good point added to the conversation.
Yeah, I'm not sure that AI will ever be able to generate more bad content than social media, but let's see.
AI on social media.
Wow, Jonathan, Cornell, thank you to both of you for being here today. Really great insights. So if we would summarize the conversation, would be like to not wait forever, to just start. It's a tool, start testing it, see how it works, and if it's worth it to actually assess the ROI and then scale further on. And then for anybody who's interested in turning AI into actual measurable results, you can visit AscentCore.com or actually click the link below. Thank you everyone for being here and see you next time.